Not content to steal, pay homage to science fiction and fantasy writers and filmmakers who are far better than him, Zack Snyder is planning on going to the streets of Los Angeles with a new film that's supposed to be a thriller based in the world of Los Angeles PD. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome to the StudioJake vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast and consider becoming a channel member. All right, so I make no secret that I'm no fan of Zack Snyder, with the exception of 300 and that owl cartoon he did. I'm not a fan. His stuff comes off as incredibly hacky. He's a poor storyteller. He was originally a very good visual artist, but that has since gone to the wayside, especially after watching his zombie films and his Rebel Moon duology. Now, Netflix is going to give him another chance, despite his Army of the Dead, Army of Thieves, and Rebel Moon being very poorly received, not just by those stuffed shirt critics, but also by the audience. That's right. Even though Rebel Moon had inconsistent lore, terrible character arcs, terrible story, terrible plot, which is kind of the baseline for all of Zack Snyder's projects, Netflix is going to give him another shot at the director's chair with a film that is supposedly going to follow the LAPD. This is according to bleedingfool.com. Zack Snyder is calling the cops. With his two-part epic sci-fi saga behind him, the filmmaker is reteaming with Netflix for a new feature project. This one, an untitled action movie centered on the Los Angeles Police Department. Snyder will direct the feature, because of course he does, and is co-writing it with Kurt Johnstad, his frequent collaborator with whom he's worked on The 300, the adaptation of the Frank Miller comic, and the Rebel Moon movies, among others. No word on whether or not this will align more with the defund the police crowd or the thin blue line crowd. I hope it's closer to the latter. Snyder is producing along with wife and partner Deborah Snyder and Wesley Collar via the trio's Stone Quarry banner. All right, so I want you to go on over to bleedingfool.com, read the article for yourself, as well as there are many other breaking pop culture news stories. Zack Snyder is plainly a terrible filmmaker. I have said this ever since The Watchmen. I had hope for Man of Steel and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, but of course he failed on every level. I don't know what he does behind the scenes. Despite being a terrible filmmaker, he apparently is a really good hustler, because despite not one, not two, but 4 failures on Netflix, that being Army of the Dead, Army of Thieves, Rebel Moon Part 1, Rebel Moon Part 2, Netflix is willing to give him another chance, and this time with a movie about the Los Angeles Police Department. I like cop movies, I like cop shows, I watch a bunch of them. Some of the newer ones on TV are not that great, and there hasn't been really a decent cop movie in a number of years. So normally when I hear something like that, it might pique my interest. Not so much with Zack Snyder, or as I like to call him, Hack Snyder, taking the director's chair. Like I said, this guy must just be a brilliant hustler, because all of his movies end in failure. He totally dropped the ball on a film franchise that was just handed to him on a silver platter. And honestly, he hasn't done a good or even decent film since 300. Okay, sure, the Owl cartoon, I guess, was decent, but none of his other movies have ever achieved any sort of greatness. The Watchmen was bland, boring. It didn't understand the comic it was based on. Even Alan Moore himself said that. And it was yawn inducing. And it had weird music picks, like whenever the comedian is fighting Ozymandias, they have the song Unforgettable, which is a love song playing in the background. Why? It was dumb. It was a poor creative choice. Then, of course, we get to his vision for the DC universe, where Man of Steel, he turns Superman into an angsty teenager who has to whine about his problems. He turned Batman into a sad sack who has to cry about his mommy, with Superman who also cries about his mommy. He turned the Justice League, which should have been an inspiring tale of Earth's greatest heroes coming together to save the world from an alien threat, into a sad, pathetic group who can't get their act together. And of course, he had to give Jared Leto's poor version of the Joker a cameo because he's too dumb, I guess, to put his own spin on the character. Yes, I know Suicide Squad was technically part of his universe. Still, poor decision. And then, of course, he goes on to make Army of the Dead, which was an inconsistent romp of a film that was boring. It didn't make sense. And also, the main character's daughter caused all the problems in that movie to happen, and she faces no consequences for what she did. Army of These was a little better, but he didn't direct it. He just wrote it and produced it. And it was still not good knowing what's coming. Not to mention, we get to the Rebel Moon series, which he basically just stole everything from Star Wars, from Harry Potter, from The Lord of the Rings, from The Magnificent Seven. He just took the baseline of those 4 films and made a sci-fi movie that no one cares about, that had a terrible plot, a terrible protagonist, terrible characters. So when I say I'm not excited for what would be a Los Angeles Police Department thriller or action film that he's filming, I can't begin to describe how much I don't care. Now, I'll end up watching this movie because my top 10 worst films of the year always needs, to have a list, right? It always needs to happen. So I'll watch it just for that sake. Now, if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong. Sometimes filmmakers who I haven't liked previously surprise me. For instance, Quentin Tarantino, while not a hack like Zack Snyder, I think he's overrated. He just makes B movies on an A-list budget. However, Jackie Brown and his World War II film definitely surprised me, and they were good films. And I said, hey, I like Jackie Brown. I like his World War II film. I didn't care for any of his other movies. I thought that they were bland and relies on style over substance. With Zack Snyder, originally that was his problem. He relied too much on style over substance, but now his style is all wrong. He's all out of whack. He's got way too much time on his hands. He takes you into an adventure assuming you already know the characters. He doesn't know what plot development is. He doesn't know what character growth is. He just sits back and goes through his story at neck break speed and then just expects you to say, look how genius I am. And what's worse is, like I said, a lot of times he steals from other people's genius to say that it's his. He even did this with 300, which I think is his one good film, where he was talking about how great it is, how brilliant he is. He based that movie on a graphic novel by Frank Miller. Frank Miller was the genius behind 300, not Zack Snyder. And one of my favorite things that all these Snyder cultists, these people who think he can do no wrong, is they always turn to Wonder Woman. So Snyder produced and developed the story for Wonder Woman. Outside of that, he didn't really do much. He just had a vague story by Zack Snyder and, of course, produced by Zack Snyder. And Patty Jenkins made the first Wonder Woman. And her and the writer of the script were the real heroes of that movie. But everyone's like, but then look at Wonder Woman 1984. Zack Snyder had nothing to do with that. No, he was the producer of that movie. So if you want to give him all the credit for the first movie, you have to give him all the blame for the second movie, because he also had credit in that film. You don't get to say he was actually the secret genius behind Wonder Woman and then go, he was not involved with Wonder Woman 1984, even though he clearly was. The credits say he was. You can go back and forth on that, but the point is that he is a terrible filmmaker, and I'm not looking forward to any film that he ever does or announces. Like I said, I end up watching them just because I need to pad my top 10 worst films, and I know he's the go-to guy for that. Because Man of Steel, which I would not have put on a worst films list, but he has gotten progressively worse ever since the Justice League debacle. It's gone downhill. He has gone downhill even more so than he already was. He is a hack who doesn't know how to do storytelling at all. His movies are bland. They won't try to be eye-popping, but even that's starting to fade away. So no, I'm not looking forward to this cop movie by him. I have zero expectations for it, but the trailer's not out. So maybe the trailer, which is supposed to hype me up for the movie, maybe that will change my mind, but I Doubt it. If you like that video, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment to what you think, and of course, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. Visit my website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where I have more news, reviews, and views on so many other things. So check it out. I especially have some reviews of some Zack Snyder films, so you can head on over to StudioJakeMedia.com to check that out. You can also support me on my locals community. You can sign up for a monthly subscription, or you can just send me tips. It really helps me out when you do things like that, because I'm a small indie creator who does these sort of things on my own, including write novels. You can pick up the supernatural thriller Cacophony, the high fantasy series The Seven Royals, which includes All Good Things and Breaking the Stars, and my novella Blessed Child. They're perfect to pick up for your teenager, which you can read along with them. I think you will enjoy it. Pick one or all of them up and leave me a 5-star review. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.
'Cause I've been living life right like I could just die